Okay, so I've been full of just random thoughts lately, and this is just another one of those random thoughts. And though in parts of this video it may seem like a hot take, this whole video is less of a hot take and more of a alternate perspective on the performance industry. So in very recent times, I have taken close notice to the behavior and business practices of a lot of these performance shops. And what I have noticed is the bad offenders are actually not the big businesses. Usually the businesses, more corruption, like that's kind of how you think, but no, it's not. What I've learned to realize is it's the ground level, smallest little shops that are actually the worst offenders when it comes to this stuff. And it's the bigger companies that are the good ones. It's a very interesting perspective when you look at it that way, because in a lot of the retail and sales world, the larger the company, generally more shenanigans will go on. But in the performance industry specifically, performance parts for cars and automotive, the large businesses that are actually the good ones, and the small little independent shops are just horrible. And the sad part to all of this is I am a huge advocate, and I've said it many times, to support small and or local businesses. However, if you are a business owner and you're doing nothing to support your community appropriately and responsibly, then there's no reason that your community should support you. It is a two-party system when it comes to that, like it's not just, oh, they happen to be in my town, even though they're a bunch of asshats, I still have to go and spend my money with them. No, that's not the case. It takes two to tango. Sadly, when it comes to the performance industry, there's a lot of these independent shops that are tangoing by themselves, or they're trying to drag you along for the tango. And it just seems really wrong. And in recent time for me, a lot of this has become more obvious because a lot of it has been directed towards me, or I've had experience it firsthand. Now, I'm not really talking about like just a mechanic shop or whatever, because we all know there are good mechanics and there are crap mechanics. Like that's been a thing from day one. A lot of people think that in the performance side of things, it's like its own little niche thing. And, everyone's a good guy. You can't get a bad shop. Wrong. Like there are still many bad businesses out there, even if they are trying to sell you go fast goodies. Now, of course, I've made my complaints about some of the responses I've gotten over a specific performance shop here in Florida. And I never really bashed on how they do business. They have very questionable practices that they have implemented for selling certain products. I'm not getting into that because I don't want to open up any can of worms with that, or any business that I'm going to be talking about in this video, but just throwing it out there. And that was kind of like the first really just eye-opening experience for all this for me. And then we have my recent visit to a machine shop to look in having parts fixed for my Mustang. And generally, it was always having existing parts fixed by a machine shop was the cheapest way to go. That's why they were in business. But when it was noticeably cheaper to buy new compared to having it fixed, that's when you realize there's a problem. This particular shop seems to live in a whole different world that isn't this one, whole different reality for pricing. And I've noticed that with a lot of different shops, like their labor rates are ridiculous. And this is another huge problem I've noticed within the performance world. It's one thing to be a regular mechanic, you charge 110, 120, whatever an hour to do basic repairs. But these performance shops will be charging 150, 160, all the way up to $200+ an hour to, take a few bolts off a factory part and to put a performance part on that they didn't even make. And yet they're going to charge you 2 hours of labor at $200 an hour to do that. just because they're selling performance parts. You know, like, it's, come on, what? And that's something I've noticed is that, you know, that like the labor rates have gone up so much. Like the inflation of labor rates for mechanics and, you know, this kind of work has significantly exceeded the inflation rate on just the parts that you're buying in terms of manufacturing and what you can buy them for. 3 years ago, labor rates were like still $100 an hour for work. Now there are 150 plus most places you go, which is just unreal. If it's work that only a very skilled and very knowledgeable person can do, or if it's work that only a business with very specific tools and machines can do, I guess in that case, yeah, you know, whatever the rate may be, because it's something that you yourself, even if you took the time to learn, could not do. But most things you need at a performance shop, like most times just it's installing a part or whatever, the average Joe can learn how to do it and save themselves so much money. It's so unreal. And, you know, these are skills that anyone can obtain. They just have to be willing to learn. Like when it comes to welding and whatnot, what the average person would pay to have a custom exhaust made, they could buy a super nice welder and just start learning to weld themselves. Though with that said, you know, there's a lot of caveats why someone wouldn't do that. But, you know, like I said, this is just an alternate perspective. With all of that said, I just saw a Facebook post come around from another performance shop who was bashing on modifications done to a specific intake that not only has been done by manufacturers for many years in terms of the material you're using, which is an epoxy, but done by the average Joe for many, many years without problems. And they are just going off on this about why you should not use an epoxy in the intake to do this mod. And you should only be doing the mod by welding in metal to the areas where you would be putting epoxy. So, you know, they're sitting here basically saying epoxy's bad, even though the industry has been using it for, God, the last 30 freaking years or more with no issues. And that their way of welding in metal is superior. And the funny part is that they're a performance shop. You know, that's their thing. Performance is literally in their name. And they mentioned that they would sacrifice 30 to 40 horsepower in the name of quality to use a weld over epoxy. And I'm like, oh my God, you can't be kidding me. You literally are saying that you'd rather have someone pay you, God knows whatever, 150, 60 freaking dollars an hour to weld in metal to these places where simple epoxy can be filled in for a quarter of the cost, in which in your case, you're saying that doing it your way would yield less power, yet you're the performance shop selling the service and you're citing quality of the job for the reason having it done. I don't know. I'm not with that one. I'm really not. And I've seen this before with shops where they offer these just weird, absurd services that really are not beneficial as a whole, and they charge a premium for that service. And it's just so crazy that this is how these shops are keeping their lights on. And, you know, of course, they go and say this like, oh, yeah, well, we do this special service where we take this existing OEM part, we do a couple things here, we weld in some titanium and this, and, you know, we fart in it after we're done just to make sure all of it's nice and cured and whatnot. And then we're going to sell it to you with the expectations that you're going to get the same results we've gotten when we put it on our fully built test car and ran it on a dyno that we made sure that we controlled the conditions of, so the results were as favorable as possible. All the while, you, the dumb consumer, are going to spend the crazy amount of money we think our crap is worth, even though it's not, to buy it, and we're going to walk away with money in our pockets, and you're going to walk away with no money in your pocket, but yet we're all happy. I just find this so crazy. Like, what I've learned is you have to be very cautious in who you trust. Doesn't matter if they happen to work on the same car as you like, if they sell the parts for the car that you have, because none of that tells you whether it's a good shop or not. It doesn't tell you anything about them. And I've made this mistake a few times myself. Obviously, this is what's come around to make this video. Now, I have experienced great relationships with shops. When I had the custom exhaust made for my SHO, the shop that I enlisted to do the work was awesome. I wish I was still in Maryland to be able to support their business. You know, shops like them, they're out there. They really are. But they're also these pretend shops. You know, these shops who think they are the elite. They are pricing themselves as top tier work, but they're offering bottom tier services and bottom tier customer service, bottom tier quality, bottom tier everything. And that's where I've noticed this problem lies. You know, you got to make sure you do your due diligence, make sure that the shop you're spending your money with is a legit shop and not a poser shop, because they're out there. They really are. And they're out there in troves, and they make it look like they are the real deal, the bee's knees, and they are not. They're nothing but hacks, cons, just selling you into the idea of what they're doing, and what they're selling is superior when it's not. I think that pretty much summarizes this whole video and summarizes a lot of the performance industry. You got to be careful who you go with, because even if someone goes to the extent of making a part that no one else has made, doesn't mean that it's good or it's worth the money that they're going to charge for it or whatever, because there are a lot of useless parts out there that really offer no benefit, but yet the companies who make them and sell them will swear up and down, because obviously that's what they're going to try to do to sell their crappy product, that this is what you need. And it's not the case. And you just got to be able to spot the differences and know who is real and who isn't. So I think that is just going to wrap it up here for this video. Let me know what you think. 30 thoughts in the comments, and that will be it. So if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up, share with everyone you know. If you want to see more content like this and you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Keep a lookout for the next Karz Created video.